You're listening to the Fezcast, the Saracens fans podcast, bringing you the independent and unhinged views of the voices in our heads, as well as those of our special guests. To get in touch with us, find the Fezcast on social media and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube and more. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Fezcast. And I'm going to try and be cheerful because I've got with me Duncan Downer. You've been up to Glasgow, haven't you? Went up there on one of your jets. You come back this morning, and quite frankly, you're like quite a lot of people that we've seen. You're pretty pissed off, really, today.
It wasn't this morning. I literally got in the door. We're talking at 7 o'clock on Monday, and I literally got in the door 10 minutes ago after a fantastic but exhausting weekend with absolutely worn out, but having had a great weekend ruined by an abject performance. Emmylou Harris was playing in Glasgow last night, and I think the consensus was it would have been a sensible idea to go and watch her instead of going to the match. But one thing I will say is that the first time I've been to Scotstoun Stadium, it is great, really good crowd, really good atmosphere. Surprisingly reminiscent of StoneX, right down to being part of a sports college campus. So was glad that we went there, was glad to meet a lot of the Glasgow fans who are fantastic.
I want to have a quick word about some news that came out today. As you say, we're talking to each other on Monday, and it's the retirement from international rugby from a trailblazing referee, Sarah Cox, who, I remember Sarah was on the line, wasn't it, when we got beat by Cornish Pirates a few years back in the championship. But a brilliant referee. And as I say, a trailblazer. I mean, where she trod, others such as Holly Davidson have followed. But she really smashed the glass ceiling and opened the door for women, not only in women's rugby, but in men's rugby as well, to be top-class quality officials.
Yeah, and both her and I forget the name of the blonde Scottish lady are both excellent referees. Absolutely deserve their place both within the women's game and the men's game. One of the things that happened last night is that when we went to the whiskey bar in Glasgow, we were actually sat next to and had a very interesting chat with Luke Ramos and the other two linesmen, which was fascinating, talking a lot of insight into the pressure that referees are under and why they are. And I do have a question mark in my mind. I don't know what age she is, and perhaps it's retiring to go on to start a family or whatever, but it's not a stress-free existence being a referee, and that might or might not have played a part in her decision.
Well, indeed, it's interesting you mentioned Luke Ramos, because I shall be mentioning him a bit further, a bit later on in the talk. But before we do that, I wanted to pick up on something, and I'm calling somebody out now, Duncan. And I'm calling out Andy Goode.
Okay.
Because Andy Goode was on commentary. And, you know, I mean, Ryan Wilson was also on commentary, and he irritates the living daylights out of me. You know, the most English Scotsman ever. I mean, he makes Jim Hamilton sound like McCormack of McCormackville. But, yeah, Andy Goode last night, he goes on to commentary. He should never be allowed anywhere near a Saracens commentary because he's biased and his hatred of Saracens shows through. And yesterday, he made the comment that everybody at Saracens hates him. Well, there's good reason for that, Andy. It's because we will discuss later on performances and attitude and the such like of Saracens players. But regardless of how bad we thought Saracens players were yesterday and have been this season, there's not a single one of them that has approached lack of professionalism and attitude stinkingness that Andy Goode supplied in the season he was with us. Honestly, I do not have a great deal of time for Andy Goode, and he shouldn't be allowed anywhere near a Saracens commentary, Duncan.
Well, obviously, I was watching the game live. I haven't had a chance today to catch up with any of the broadcasts, so I didn't see a single word of what he said. He became, at the end, very much a Wasps man. At the time of our naughty period, there were a lot of people at Wasps who completely misguidedly thought that what we were doing somehow contributed to their bankruptcy. Well, it didn't. You know, you don't go bankrupt to the tune of 100 million or because of something that we did with the salary cap, but I'm sure that had a large part of it.
Yeah, it did. Well, I've got that one off my chest. Andy, if you do want right of reply, we will be glad to host you on here, and you and me can have a to and fro if you like on the Fezcast. Do get in touch with us. But other than that,
Well, hopefully we'll get Jim Hamilton on and we can ask him, to what extent do you think Andy Good is a it'll be interesting to see what he says.
Let's move on to the game, Duncan. And we had lots and lots and lots of three-word reviews. And thank you very much, first of all, to Barry, who filtered through all the ones that we couldn't use and managed to get the bin file down to a manageable level. But there is an awful lot of commentary going around. Quite justified. Look, we're fans. We're entitled to be a bit upset if results don't go our way. But what I wanted to start with on the three-word reviews, and I'm not going to mention everybody because we'd be here and we'd read through them all, Duncan, and I'd say good night, see you next week. But I want to pick up, first of all, Glasgow Warriors. And you mentioned it already about going up there, and when Glasgow come down to London and when we gone to Glasgow, it's a great atmosphere. And the SSA, their three-word review, classy 16th Warrior, and they are a class act. It sounded on the telly, the ground was hostile. They were able to, I'm not going to say influence the referee, when things happen, the referee was aware that they happened because they make absolutely apparent that things that they didn't like had happened. And I mean, that's nature of the game, isn't it? And that's the sort of attitude that we need at StoneX, that noisiness, isn't it?
Yeah, they're superb. They're very, very loud. Now, I have heard before, I wasn't there before when we gone up there and won, that they, like us at StoneX, can be quiet as well. But last night, they were loud. Very, very knowledgeable. Yes, they're biased as hell. So one of the nature of rugby, when you a follower of a team, you always think the referee is against you. Well, no, I don't think so. And we'll come on to that. But yeah, very, very good crowd.
Now, Roger King did mention, and this is what he said, Warriors too good. And Warriors were too good. Now, there are a number of aspects which we will go into as to why I think they were too good, some of which is to do with the way that we played. Some of it is to do with the way that they played. And some of it is the way that the refereeing went. I do have an issue, though, that a lot of people seem to have gone on, and I know that you're not going to be one of those people, Duncan, because we've discussed this off air already. But I'm getting the impression that a few people think that we should have gone to Glasgow and won that game, which is ridiculous. Glasgow, 100% record in this competition. They beat Toulouse after being 21-0 down against them and just ripped them apart like you wouldn't believe. People from all leagues, whether it's in the URC or in the Champions Cup, go to Glasgow and do not get results. So that's number one. If we're sat there thinking that we're going to go to Glasgow just because history says that we always win in Glasgow, that doesn't happen anymore. Glasgow are an extremely good, well-coached, well-drilled team full of internationals. So if anybody was expecting us to go up there and win, that's a bit of over-arrogance, I think, that's misplaced.
Well, I think with any sporting team, you will have an element of the support who feel entitled to win. And if we're not winning, then it's someone's fault. And especially straight after a match, people will post things with a feeling, pretty raw feelings. I didn't meet anybody, and there were a lot of Saracen supporters up there. I didn't meet anybody who was travelling with anything but hope rather than expectation, let alone a feeling of entitlement. We knew that we were facing a very good team. And the feeling, especially this morning, but after the game as well, was a feeling of despondency, not about the results, not about feeling that we should have won, but the manner in which we're playing. Because Glasgow are one of those teams, and we discussed it before, you've got Saints, Bristol, Exeter, Glasgow, let alone Bordeaux. And whereas we appear to get the ball, we might have a little bit of passing, but it's usually behind, but we usually end up bashing into the defence, and sooner or later there's going to be a mistake. We had one main exception, one person who stood out head and shoulders above anybody else in the team, and once again that was Roti, who would break the line, but all but one occasion when he did, no one with him. Absolutely isolated. The one time someone was on his shoulder was the one time that we nearly scored. When you contrast that with Glasgow and one of those teams, yes, there's an element of going in, bashing into the line. But sooner or later, there's usually an occasion when there are 2 or 3 or even possibly 4 of them who are attacking at speed together so that someone's there and there's a pass out and it's a try. The question that I have, and it's certainly an opinion that many of the disappointed are holding, that there is something wrong with the coaching. We're still living in that age when we had a dominant Billy Vunipola punching holes, and that's the way it would come, and that's still the way we're playing, and it's just not working. Just one of the very knowledgeable Glasgow crowd sitting beside me, great bloke to talk to, said, not in arrogance or being provocative, he said, you're very predictable, and our guys are very good at defending against this. And he was right.
Now, I'm going to play slight devil's advocate here, and I'm going to bring in a couple of mitigating circumstances, I think. And it is the one thing that I noticed personally watching on the television. I don't know whether it was apparent. I felt we had an awful lot of possession, yes. We didn't do enough with that possession, or that when we were in position to make that final break, we made a mistake. Now, we only needed one of them to come off. And I think, when we saw against Toulouse, we had one come off and then suddenly, the game opened up a bit. A little bit more accuracy. That's something we can criticise the team. However, I think a lot of it came down to the fact that Glasgow got the rub of the green when it came to the offside line. That's the nature of the game. We needed to work out that they were encroaching on that offside line and not being pinged on it. And also the amount of times at breakdown, they went past the ball, hands went on the floor, and then came back and they got turnover, breakdown penalties against us. There were at least 3 or 4 occasions where a different ref, a different view, a different time and place, we'd have got those penalties. Now, that's not to say what we didn't then do was work that out and do something a bit different. Perhaps keep the ball away from that heavy area. Our idea was we didn't have anything other than physicality to offer into that game. And when the physicality didn't work, we didn't quite have enough invention, as you say, behind the scrum. However, that physicality could have been rewarded a bit better had it been refereed slightly differently.
Well, there were 9,500 people there, and the rest were Sarri supporters who were screaming because we were offside a lot. And when you're sitting at the side, you see the lines, they, not always, but they often had a point. I honestly don't think it was the refereeing that was a critical.
I didn't say it was a critical thing. I just think it contributed. And if you look at the facts, 9,500 people will see that Saracens got penalised 19, 20 times in the game, and Glasgow Warriors got penalised, I think, 4. And they were both teams were on the legality of where they should be. Glasgow Warriors did it an awful lot better, more effectively, and got away with it a lot more than we did. And that is a contributory factor. It didn't affect the result, as I'm sure you would have an absolute hemorrhage if I said it did affect the result. It didn't. I think that in any game, the percentages between failure and success are always very, very small. Saracens, with 70% of possession as they had at one point, with the physicality they would bring, and let's be honest about it, when we play Newcastle on the weekend, if we have 70% possession with that physicality, we're winning by 50 points on the weekend, coming up against Newcastle.
Hope so. I mean, there are 9,500 people, they will say, well, however many times we got penalised, it should have been X number of times more. But look, at least we're agreed that it wasn't the refereeing. My own personal opinion, watching it from where I was watching it from, is we could have played for another week and not scored a try. I do understand what you're saying. Maybe we would have got the rub of the green somewhere, but it didn't look like it.
The other thing about it is that regardless of whether the refereeing was poor, bad or indifferent, a lot of senior players got very, very frustrated very, very quickly by it. And you could see that because things were kicking off between them. That, you had Andy Onyama Christie having a go at Owen Farrell, telling him to shut up. There was an awful lot of people who were frustrated by it, which they should have been bigger than. Having said that, and having played in games where you do feel you're just not getting anything. I understand why it's very easy to get frustrated like that. The senior players should be a bit better than that.
It is very worrying to see, and there are rumours, I don't know whether they're true, about Farrell falling out with team members, both there and in training. I got no idea whether they're true or not. Yeah, it was a very worrying sight, that. Again, speaking to Luke Ramos, there was an incident where we were going, why on earth was that a penalty? Well, there was one instance it was a penalty because Mauro pulled someone's scrum cap off and Farrell came over and was tapping them on the head like a Benny Hill skit, which led to it all kicking off, which is sort of funny as I say it now, but it's perhaps an indication that we're doing a few silly things when we shouldn't.
Yeah, but then again, I think that's ridiculous that those are penalty offences because we all have a bit of niggle. That's a case of, come on, boys, don't do it again. That's not a penalty. This is coming from someone who made some of the most nefarious little bits and pieces of digs and whatever that you could do. I mean, it's just one of those things, isn't it?
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hello, this is Akina Gondwe of Saracens Women, and you're listening to the Fezcast, and we are both proudly sponsored by the Saracens Supporters Association. For a £10 annual subscription to the SSA, you'll get the chance to buy tickets for away matches, receive a regular newsletter, and an exclusive SSA badge. They also arrange pre-match gatherings and player-coach events. As well as sponsoring both me and the Fezcast, they also sponsor Louis Johnson from the men's team and the Saracens Foundation Track Club. Not bad for £10. You can join up at membermojo.co.uk/SSA. Enjoy the rest of this edition of the Fezcast, and I look forward to seeing you at StoneX. Come on, you Sarries.
This is the Fezcast.
Where do we go from here? I mean, let's think about our performance. Interesting, Gavin McCucken on the Free Word Review said new attack coach. Now, I don't know whether he's having a pop at Di as the new attack coach or whether he's asking for a new attack coach. My comment on that is we've got a new attack coach, and I think it's a bit unfair to expect half a season in that everything that he wants, it will take a season for him to bed in his ideas, I feel. And, whether he's got the players there, maybe we're looking at shipping a couple of players on. You're talking about the likes of Alex Nazowski perhaps moving on. Are they this season got a new attack coach in, identifying ways of going forward? It's not going to be an instantaneous fix. It'll be next season that you'll see when they've got a full pre-season, after a season where you work out where the issues are. That's when you question whether he's the right man in that job.
I hope you're right. I suspect that more accurately, perhaps he wanted to say new attack approach, because again, playing the gloomster here, which is my role tonight, the worry is that what we're seeing is how many seasons was it ago that we started, in inverted commas, the transition, and then we saw these kind of problems in attack. And what people are getting grumpy about is all these years later, when we get pieces in the Telegraph about how delighted the coach and team are that we completed our transition ahead of schedule, that we're seeing exactly the same problems in attack that we've been seeing for at least 2 seasons now. And again, that difference between the way that we play and the teams that are playing, probably because, Exeter are the prime example, the rules changed. So they transition successfully from being a pick-and-go team to the modern type of team that we are not appearing to be. If I might pick up on one thing, I lamented last week about the lack of the younger players playing, and I was contacted by a number of people who pointed out to me that Jack Bracken and Tobias Elliott and Nathan Mikolov are all injured and out of contention. And we've got Max Eek and other players injured. There seems to be, we had a discussion during the week, there seems to be a possibility that it's not possible to pull Angus Hall and Olamide Siddiqui back because they're on loan contracts and it's restrictive on how many people can play for the team. I think there's also an impatience that this so-called transition isn't seeing enough of the young players playing. But both myself and them are being a little unfair perhaps on Mark McCall because he's going as fast as he can on that element.
I mentioned it 2 weeks ago, the comparison between us and Exeter Chiefs. If you think last year, Exeter Chiefs very nearly got Sam's Norris's prediction of being relegated. They were absolutely awful last season. But that was clearly a season in which they were prepared to take an awful lot of grief. And it was 2 years after their exodus. We're a season behind that now. We're having exodus season last season, this season, because we started our transition, it would appear, a season later. So I do think that next year is the key year. That if we come into next year and suddenly what we're expecting us to hit the ground like Exeter Chiefs have hit the ground this year, running, if that doesn't happen, then we've got a big, big problem. The question is, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? Can we wait that long? And can we have that faith in what we've got? And I mean, it comes up to a lot of people are saying Rugby Fan 77, McCall, thin ice. So many people, 3-word review was time for change. And maybe it is. And when do you call it? What I take issue with, though, Duncan, is the way that people are going for Smalley. Smalley is a club legend, right? He's the greatest Premier director of rugby there has ever been. Simple as. He's up there with Jack Roll, at Bath. For those of us older to remember Jack Roll at Bath. He's up there with the guys who were at Leicester, the top guys at Leicester, when Leicester's eras of dominance. There was a comment on Facebook, Paul, clear off. That's not how we should be doing this. This is, Mark McCall's got an awful lot more credit in the bank than being told to clear off. Yes, we can question what he's doing. I'm going to bring football into it, okay? I'm a West Ham fan. And other than this weekend when we beat Spuds, we've had a pretty shocking season. But 3 seasons ago, we won a European trophy with David Moyes. And then all the fans, the entitled fans, as I call them, the new fans who came in when we suddenly had 65,000 seats to fill as opposed to 35,000 seats. And I say, well, David Moyes will never take you to the next level. Get rid of him. Get rid of him. And we've had a succession of managers that have never improved the club since David Moyes. And David Moyes is now at Everton and doing great stuff. So the question is, okay, fair enough, let's question Mark McCall, but is there somebody better to take over than him at the moment? And unless you could get Andy Farrell out of his Ireland contract, I don't think there is. And, secondly, let's show him a little bit more respect because I think he deserves that. Question what's going on, question if he's the right man, but basically telling him to sling his hook is beyond the pale for me.
100% with that. Although I would repeat that the problem with social media is that people can comment when they should be counting to 10. The criticisms and worries about Mark McCall, and they should be said with respect, you're absolutely right. I won't repeat. I've said them already about concerns about whether we're not changing style. I think the comparisons with Exeter and actually Saints as well, I don't think we're one season behind them because we haven't gone through that process of playing a team full of youngsters. And I do hope that next season is that season that we do because, and it might be because there was a photograph on Facebook, and I wish I'd downloaded it, of all of the players that we've got who were said to be in contract negotiations with somebody, whether it's us or another team. And we already know about Tom Willis and Harry Wilson. We could have a big change forced on us and a necessity to play young players because of that. We shall see. Because the other complaint is that Mark McCall is being overly loyal to certain players and particularly older players. Now, I've said before that may be forced on him by injury, but the style of play and the over-reliance on certain players is what's causing this unease amongst the majority and occasionally overly rudeness amongst some.
It's a self-defeating attitude, I feel, because we was hoping that Dave Loxton might have been able to join us tonight, but I read his report for the SSA, and I read he'd probably make you seem like Mr. Chuckles tonight, wouldn't he? He was questioning again attitude after the game, players not coming over to the fans and everything like that. And he mentioned the fact that they seem fractious amongst themselves.
Yeah.
I don't actually see that necessarily as such a bad thing, to be perfectly honest with you, Duncan, because 2 reasons. One, the biggest fight I've ever had on a rugby field was with a teammate on a training paddock, where a pair of us just got a disagreement and the standoff decided he wanted to tell me how to play number 8. And it ended up in 6 blokes holding me back and three holding the standoff back, and we were taking lumps out of each other. But we got on the field on the Saturday and played a game, and we played superb because of it. It got it out in the air. It honestly sometimes can look a bit nasty. You don't keep it off of the playing field where it could be seen. You keep it on the training paddock. It shows that people do care. And it might be misdirected, might need somebody to come in and say, boys, you can't do it this way. But you see that there's desire and care and attitude to call it out and to deal with it, and to it shows passion, if nothing else.
Well, I hope you're right, and I hope it is an indication of passion. On the other hand, and I've never been a professional rugby player, so I definitely don't know what I'm talking about here, but I would imagine that if you don't have a togetherness and a team spirit at that elite level of rugby, it's more difficult to do what's required to win games, because so much of it is the mental side and the motivation and the togetherness, etc., because it's such a tough game. Now, I don't criticise the team for lack of effort in this game at Glasgow, because there were many, many times when they were defending on the line, and you can see when you're up close that they're putting everything into it. But I think what happened occasionally is that they themselves got downhearted and dispirited because what they were doing with all the effort they were putting in was going nowhere. So occasionally there would be oh, for goodness sake, which Glasgow would immediately take advantage of, and often does not have a try. There was one ridiculous incident, I don't know whether it came across on the telly, but it was right in front of me, where the ball was bobbling around. It was in play, but it was bobbling around on the ground, and our players were sort of going, oh, and not even running for it, to which Glasgow leapt on it and luckily knocked on. But I think it's more an element of that, this, oh, for goodness sake. And without team spirit, it's more easy to fall into that.
I don't disagree with you. And those of us who have played the game at any sort of level, we would have had those experiences on the field. If your head goes down, your head goes down. However, you're right. I don't think there is a lack of effort. One, there's an apparent desire to get it right. Paolo Frutini said, are we Quins? Well, no, we're not Quins, because as bad as we may think we were, Quins in that game would have lost by 50 quite easily, because they wouldn't have had the defensive application that we did. So number one, there is a desire, there's application. And in defence, I thought the fourth try actually flattered Glasgow a little bit, because as much as we huffed and puffed and got absolutely nothing, two of their tries at least came from moments when we were down to 14 men and it was just defence. And, Glasgow just kept recycling, and the dam broke. But they had to work so bloody hard to get that dam to break. That's great. You can see that the lads are putting in the effort. It's just that effort is going to leave us short, particularly if you've got men on the sin bin. And the fourth try came when Noah Kalori had been sent to the sin bin, and we'd lost Ben Earl to an HIA, and your top tacklers had gone off the field. The boys were on the bootstraps, and whether that's conditioned, whether they should be better conditioned, I don't know. But they put an awful lot of effort in there. And Marcus Street, after getting an injury after an illegal pull down of the scrum by Glasgow, where his elbow got hyperextended, and he wanted to play on and tried his absolute utmost to play on. And you can see there was a couple of players that were playing on 1 3/4 legs by the end of the game. So we can't criticise their desire and effort. It's just the application of it.
Yeah.
In defence, the application was fine.
Totally. And it's a shame in many ways that Marcus Street has got such spirit, because he should not have played on. And if he's out, him and Ben Earl out next week, that is a huge shame. I thought that it was indicative. I was looking forward to Tom Willis coming on, a fresh Tom Willis coming on at the 55th minute. And our bench, overall, really strong bench. I thought it was going to be a way to get back. But Tom Willis was totally contained, which I think was an indication of the fact that our tactics, that bash through the middle tactic against top teams, it might get you something, as you say, but often as not, won't.
Well, I suppose that's where we are at the moment, isn't it? And when we talk about change and when we talk about development, at the moment, our club is not what we were 10 years ago, right? Okay, let's just drag that out. So if you've come to the club and all you've known is those years of success, then now you're looking at it, and let's be honest about it, I'll go back to the days at Vicarage Road where you'd sit there and the last game of the season you'd squeak a win against Rotherham and stay up. And you got Chris Jack trousering 200 grand a year or whatever and just not performing. We're nowhere near that bad. At the moment, our game plan seems to be, let's stay in the arm wrestle as long as we possibly can. And if we can squeak something, we squeak something. And we've done that. Yet still, we are the team that's got more, in the Premiership at least, got more bonus points than any other for try scoring. So there's got to be something right. And I think a lot of it's down to that, you're right. At the moment, we're a mid-table team. Yeah?
Yeah.
We're going to qualify at the lower end of the European. We're not going to get playoff. If we do get playoff, I'll be surprised. Okay? We're mid-table. We play Newcastle, we play Gloucester, we play Quins. These games we should be winning, and you would hope that we would win handsomely. Teams have overtaken us, and we haven't kept pace with them. So your Northampton, your Exeter, your Bath, they've overtaken us for whatever reasons they may be. And it's very difficult. I mean, what you've also got to bear in mind is 10 years ago, we had the best collection of players that the club has ever had. Well, you look at all the great teams. Manchester United are never going to get the class of 92 back. They'll have years where they're okay or good, but they'll never be as good as that class of 92. The Liverpool team of the 70s and 80s is never going to be repeated again. They might have the odd season where they get, you'll have suddenly a superstar come through. And that's our hope at Saracens. You've got Noah Kalori. He's going to be a superstar. You hope. Can we build something around him with other youngsters coming through? That's where we've got to be. And as you're right, Duncan, next year, you need to see your Ollie Hartleys, your Fergus Burke starting regularly, your Charlie Brackens, which is the one, the one thing that if Mark McCall, Joe Shaw, or anybody's listening in, what we want to see, and it has to start this Friday, is Charlie Bracken starting at 9.
Maybe they think it's right, but they're definitely creating a rod for their own back by the faith that they're putting in Ivan Van Zyl, shall we put it that way. An interesting point that's happened over the past couple of weeks, I think there's now a general feeling that Fergus Burke is the right way. He can't do it on his own, but there were signs that he was doing something different with those breaks of his. And Ollie Hartley, when he came on, the one purposeful attack that wasn't Roti was when he took that amazing line and managed to burst through their defence. But again, no one was with him. So let's hope that when they're all back, the youngsters do come in and we see that kind of application.
I say youngster, I mean, he's an established player now. Another player I really do want to mention, though, is Hugh Tizard again, who had a fine game in a Rorke's Drift kind of like Warriors, thousands of them, sir. He really stuck to his task manfully and manned up and showed the way. I think looking at Hugh Tizard, you're looking at a potential future captain there.
Like we said before, he put in the application, he didn't give up, he gave 100%.
Roti.
He's a superstar at the moment, isn't he?
Well, Steve Cummins, friend of the Fezcast, Saracens 1971, said, "Thank you, Roti." I really think that Roti should be on the radar for England for the Six Nations. He is in such good form. The way that they play, I mean, we talk about Noah Kalori being great under the high ball. For a bloke who's 3 foot shorter than Noah, he's great under the high ball as well. That is the other thing about the game. I do think we mixed it up a little bit. We didn't kick the ball away as much as we have done in the past. I think there was a 10-minute period where we reverted to it, but we were trying. It was just every time we passed the ball out, it seemed to go across the line and Elliot Daly would run sideways and Max Malins would be flat, taking the ball flat with no pace on his side. When it came back the other way, you got Roti coming in on that pace from depth, and it made all the difference. These players who are international players, a bit more switched on, should have been looking at it going, why don't we do that?
This is the point, because he's fantastic, but the 9 times out of 10 that he made an amazing break, no one was with him. And that's the key difference to when we were doing that, or Roti was doing that, and Glasgow were doing it, because that is the main problem that I see at the moment. Question about Max Malins and the same one about Elliot Daly at the moment. Have they just lost that yard of pace that makes all the difference for the style of players they are? So if it was Jack Bracken or it was Tobias Elliott or Angus Hall, who are real speed merchants like Roti, and you've got one on each wing, it probably would make a difference.
We could go on forever about this. I could hear the bathroom in the background and the razor blades being laid out on the side and the Smiths going on the CD player and God knows what else, Duncan. So I don't want to put you into any more of a despondent feel. Let's look forward to Newcastle. I can't make the game on Saturday, but I'm going to make a plea to the spectators that regardless of what's gone before, we give the boys the support, we get behind them, and be like Glasgow were, the 16th Saracen. It's important because, as I say, I'm a West Ham fan. I've seen it so many times at West Ham where within 5 minutes the crowd's on your back. It shouldn't do, but it does contribute to a malaise, to a performance. So number one, let's just say, right, line in the ground, let's get behind them, let's scream like the Glasgow fans did in Glasgow when we played Newcastle, number one. Number two, playing Newcastle Red Bull at home, you would hope, is a good way to get back on the horse, isn't it?
It's the ideal one. It's a little bit dangerous in that if we don't have a good performance and a good result, then really there's a fan forums the week afterwards and it'll be a very ugly affair if that happens. But hopefully it won't. Hopefully we'll put in a good performance. In this roller coaster season, we're due an up after this down, so hopefully we'll get the up and we'll all be a lot more cheerful.
Well, I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? We want a reaction. We've had to ask for reactions too many times this season, and I think that's a bit of a problem that needs to be addressed. We shouldn't have to be asking players to react time and time and time again. People have off days. We've had too many off days. I think one of the 3-word reviews was consistently inconsistent, and that's been the tale of the season this so far. I hope that we do look at the Newcastle game and pay it proper respect, but also pay proper respect to some young players who really could come into that team. And I'd like to see Charlie Bracken start. I'd like to see Ollie Hartley start. I'd like to see Noah Kalori start. I think Noah probably will start with Roti. Maybe move Max Malins back to fullback as his preferred position. Or hopefully, there's one of the younger players that you've already mentioned who'd be around who could come into that position. I just want us to be a bit brave against Newcastle on the weekend. And when I say brave, I mean brave from the coaching selection point of view, not necessarily on the playing point of view.
Well, that's what a lot of the fans are asking for, a little bit more braveness, which may or may not be right, because I posed the question last week. We keep on having these calls for more effort, and then we get a performance against Toulouse, which is an unbelievable amount of effort. The question mark is, can you play like that week in, week out? Is it really possible?
Well, I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Because it's all about, as we say, consistency. In reality, you should be able to be hitting 9 out of 10 performances every week. At the moment, what we're doing is we're hitting a 10 out of 10 performance. Because we put so much effort into that 10 out of 10 performance, the next week's a 7 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10. And then you put another load of effort in, and it's like feast and famine. It takes its toll. You cannot keep going to the well time and time again.
As I say, we saw no shortage of effort.
Yeah.
We saw despondency when we didn't get the break. As you said, if we got the break, maybe it would have been a different outcome. Probably not, but it would have been closer.
I suppose a good thing is we play Newcastle on the weekend. There's every chance that some senior players may get a week off to rest. And then we're into Six Nations. So Maro, Ben, Jamie are going to be going off to England, where they're going to be refreshed by a different coaching setup and hopefully a successful tournament for England, which will bring them back revitalised. Other players, the likes of Owen Farrell, whatever, are probably going to be told to bugger off to Dubai or Barbados for a couple of weeks with the family and sit on a sun lounger and just recharge their batteries. And then youngsters are going to come in and get an opportunity to stake a claim for when the Six Nations is over, one hopes. So let's look at it with a bit of confidence going forward, shall we, and a bit of optimism. And hopefully next week, whoever's on the Fezcast will be talking about a fine win against Newcastle and everything's rosy in the garden. It's not. But...
Well, you cheered me up already, Jez. Thank you.
Oh, well, I do my best. I do my best.
Could I share with you a couple of things from the, as I say, very interesting conversation with Luke Ramos? And he was talking, first off, he was talking about the pressure. He illustrated it with the Roti incident when he got a head-on-head which led to a yellow card for the Glasgow Warriors player. And him and the nearest line judge both said immediately they clearly saw, better than the TV cameras could see, immediately could see clear head on head, and it was dangerous. And it was always a yellow card, always going to be a yellow card, because they had a better view than the TV cameras. Now, like all referees, they're under instructions to keep the game flowing and not go to the TMO unless it's really essential. But they felt it was just too dangerous when you're going to give a player a yellow card not to go to the TMO, and they felt slightly ashamed about it and were quite open about it. But it was just the amount of abuse that might come to them afterwards, the kind of abuse perhaps that caused Wayne Barnes, who also totally bought into this speed up the game ethos that made him retire. If you don't go to the TMO, if you do take decisions into your own hand, it's just too nasty and dangerous, which was interesting as an illustration of the kind of pressure that refs are under.
I think I probably told this story before, but I was refereed once by a guy called Steve Pountney, RAF PTI, and I remember he had a game. Excellent referee, brilliant referee. He refereed us, and as good referees do, after the game, I was captain. He came and had a pint with me. I said, how do you think our game went? He said, well, you probably want to improve on this. This law, you need to brush up on whatever. You were getting pinged there and everything like that. And he said, how do you think I did? And I said, well, you had an absolute shocker there, didn't you? You made a right rickets with that one. And he said, oh, I'll stop you there, Jess. He says, how many times did I blow the whistle? Game. And I said, well, I don't know, 60, 70, 80, 90 times, however many it was. He said that every time I blew my whistle was because somebody made a mistake. And you're questioning me about the one mistake I've made.
That's exactly right, which is why I always feel, I know it's nice to see refs get it right, but we almost need to support them more when they get it wrong and it's a clear mistake. And he said in relation to this, because we asked him, what about French TV directors? And he said they are a nightmare and a disgrace. And they put pressure on the refs, which is unfair. And he said, we get it in the top 14 as well. We'll make a decision, game should move on, and they're constantly showing replays to make us go and change our mind. So it was interesting that a French ref was as disgusted with French TV directors, if you like, as we often are.
Well, a fair dues to Luke Ramos, because he's gone up in my estimations now because of that.
So just two more, if I may. I mean, and I was a bit sorry that I was well into my whiskey tasting at that point. We were in a place called the Pot Still, which is a famous whiskey bar in Glasgow, and I'd had way too much, so I would have liked to have remembered more. But there were two things that I particularly remember. One was one of the guys asked him, are Saracens more lippy than other teams? Because it seems to us, we were talking about Owen and others, that were a bit too lippy at times. He said, no more than any other team, which is interesting to know. And I asked him, I said, I thought Glasgow were really, really good. And he went, yeah. To which I said to him, well, where do you think they'd be in the top 14? He said, top 6.
Yeah, I think Glasgow Warriors, again, this is where we've got to have that little bit of perspective. Glasgow Warriors are going for a purple patch at the moment, which lots of teams do. They put some investment in. They're worked in the URC. They're getting good quality rugby every week in their league system. And they've got a core nucleus of players that are now internationals, British Lions. There's no wonder that they're doing well. They're very reminiscent of Saracens 10 years ago. That's the nature of the beast. And well done, Glasgow. And I hope they go a long way in the competition as well, because I don't think we are.
One funny story for you. There's a railway line that goes next to the ground. And every time a train goes by, when the game's on, they blow their horn and it's very, very loud. And he said they had one URC game when the train came by, blew its horn, and the opposition players thought it was the horn for the end of the half. And they all walked off and Glasgow scored a try.
That was brilliant. Fantastic. Well, on that note, because we're laughing, Duncan, shall we end the Fezcast for this week here and say thank you, everybody, again, for contributing. And last week as well, record figures on the downloads, which is fantastic as well. So thank you, everybody out there in Fezcast land, for your support. Thank you for the comments we got online about people saying how much they enjoy our output and everything, and hopefully we'll keep that going. I'll let you get off to your next whiskey bar and words of Jim Morrison, Duncan.
I've drunk the last whiskey I'm going to drink for a while. I can tell you, I'm absolutely shattered.
Well, I think you've done remarkably well to rush over to Glasgow to record this with me. And I will say thank you, everybody, for listening in. Thank you, Duncan, for your time. And we'll speak to you all next week on the 28th, the last one of January, when we will be hopefully talking about a fine win against Newcastle. Until then, all the best. Ta-ra!
This is the Fezcast.